Welcome to Ask Dr. Mingle, the Q&A series answering your questions about quality programs and the transition to value-based care. I'm Kyle Breckel. I'm a digital marketing specialist at Mingle Health, and I'll be hosting this episode along with Dr. Dan Mingle, founder and CEO of Mingle Health. Hi, Dr. Mingle.
Good morning, Kyle, and good day to all of you tuning in. It's great to see you again. I'm Dr. Dan Mingle. I'm here to answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Well, we have an exciting episode today all about the 2024 proposed rule, so let's just jump right in. My first question for you today, Dr. Mingle, is how important is it that we pay attention to the proposed rule?
Great question, Kyle. Everyone's busy, and the final rule annually is the one that sets the new rules in regulatory concrete. So if you're only going to invest in one, invest your time in the final rule. There are two reasons to pay careful attention to the proposed rule. First is the opportunity to comment. Medicare will accept comments on the proposals in this proposed rule until 5 p.m. Eastern Time on September 11th, 2023. You can comment by email to www.regulations.gov. Refer to the code CMS-1784-P. Your comments make a difference. Medicare reads the comments and considers all of the comments when finalizing the rules. Now, Medicare encourages only unique comments and discourages campaigns with lots of people writing in the same message. And I think it's true that a single well-reasoned, well-explained comment has a great chance of success. Though I'd be surprised if they really weren't responsive to the weight of a large number of specific comments. The second reason to pay close attention to the proposed rule is for preparation purposes. The proposed rule is advanced warning of the changes that might be finalized in early November with less than 2 months left before they generally go into effect on January 1st of the new year. Sometimes it makes sense to be building infrastructure in preparation for those changes that are likely to occur. Now, the predictive value of the proposed rule is enhanced by knowledge and experience of that annual rulemaking cycle. The relationship between legislation and regulation. Legislation is where the Congress annually, or routinely, not annually at all, but regularly sets new laws. Regulations is what the various federal organizations use to set that legislation into practice by dictating all those things that are left up to choice and aren't set by legislated requirements. And as you get to know that cycle of proposals and regulations, you'll get to know that rarely, and I don't think I've ever seen a case where Medicare enacts a rule that's that is more restrictive than the proposal. They'll often get less restrictive, or they'll postpone things that they intend to do, and you'll get to learn the language in that proposed rule that suggests that it's going to come at just a matter of time, or in this case, they've changed their minds and we'll stick with something less stringent. Thanks, Kyle, for that great question.
Yeah, thank you for the excellent answer. Our next question is about MIPS in 2024. So, Dr. Mingle, what do you think are the most important proposals for MIPS participants?
Well, there's lots of things going on in the proposed rules for MIPS, but most of it is the typical housekeeping, improving, changing some specifications, eliminating some measures, adding some measures, things like that. There's just two things I think warrant a little special attention. CMS proposes to increase the MIPS performance threshold to 82. That's an increase of 7 points from the 2023 threshold of 75. That's a big increase, especially considering that 82 represents average scores across the three performance years, 2017, 18, and 19. They've taken those 3 years, looked at the average, and even averaged that average over those 3 years' time. Now, those averages were generated in the first 3 years of MIPS, when requirements have never been easier, More bonus points were available. Cost measures were not factored in. Scores cluster in that range of the 0 to 100 scale of scores. There's very few scores that are on the low end, a lot on the high end. So a lot of differentiation in those. There's more than a 7% difference in occurrence of those 7 points between the 75 and the new 82 proposed performance threshold. On the good side, it means that there's likely to be a higher potential incentive for those who come in above the threshold than there would have been. So judge for yourself whether you approve or disapprove of that 82. That change to 82 and make your comments appropriately. The second thing is a proposal to increase the performance period for promoting interoperability. So the PI category, they propose to make a 180-day minimum performance period. That's up from 90. So this is a big change. I don't think it should be an unpopular change. I don't think many people need to go to that shorter 90-day period. It makes it match the expectations in the hospital promoting interoperability category. And it will make a bigger difference in people who are changing electronic medical records during the year. It means a larger period of time you need to be live on your new system in order to report on it. Although I expect that part of this change means to also be a little more lenient with exceptional for performance exception applications, because you won't have as much time to get your change up and running to get a full 180-day performance period. It also seems a little unlikely that they will make another increase, since this has been the hospital requirement for a long time. So we may see them both continue indefinitely with a 180-day PI performance period.
Let's move on to MVPs, MIPS value pathways. So as most of our listeners probably know, MVPs just became available for the 2023 performance year, with a target to sunset traditional MIPS and require MVPs as early as the 2028 performance year. So Dr. Mingle, what's newly proposed for MVPs in the proposed rule?
There's not much that's concrete other than what you'd expect. There are no proposed updates to the project timeline. A 2028 sunset of traditional MIPS with a move to full reliance on MVPs is still the target. Just a target, just a draft. Nothing's been said in concrete yet about that changeover date. There are proposed tweaks to the first 12 MVPs, and there are 5 new MVPs proposed for introduction. Of greatest import, I think, is the implication in the embedded request for information. CMS wants our input on how to use MVPs to define specialist roles in our ACOs. Medicare reiterates in this proposed rule that they want all Medicare beneficiaries in an accountable care setting by 2030. The 2028 proposed switchover from traditional MIPS to MVPs suggests to me that MVPs are expected to help the nation cross that final gap of accountability. Making this request for information or input in this proposal is a clear indication of intent and a strong indication that it will show up in rulemaking, that relationship of specialist to the ACO is going to show up as definite rules in the near future.
And for our final question today, Dr. Mingle, what are the issues that you see of greatest importance for Medicare Shared Savings Program, MSSP, participants in the 2024 proposed rule?
Great question, Kyle. I think the changes proposed to the Medicare Shared Savings Program, the quality reporting side of that particularly, is the biggest change and the biggest impact of this proposed rule. Despite heavy lobbying by the National Association of Accountable Care Organizations, that's NACOS, and by individual ACOs, CMS is stubbornly refusing to postpone the 2025 scheduled sunset of web interface quality reporting. Instead, they propose to offer a new quality measure collection type they're proposing to call Medicare CQMs. That's Medicare Clinical Quality Measures. It's the same three-measure APP measure set we've been seeing right along: hemoglobin A1C, blood pressure control, and depression screening and action if it's positive. This proposed Medicare CQM uses the same numerator specs of the existing MIPS CQMs. In fact, it's the same collection mechanism. The dynamics are the same as the MIPS CQMs. The denominator, however, they're proposing to limit to just Medicare patients. Now, it's very similar to what we experienced in those days of the Physician Quality Reporting System, or PQRS. With a little difference. The Medicare, they propose it will only be Medicare patients, but even with that, it's only the Medicare patients in the practice that have been seen by a primary care provider in the expanded list of providers who could be delivering primary care. So, and it's not like current web interface reporting. It's not attributed patients, it's patients seen. Now, overall, it's intended to reduce the burden on the practices. It's intended to be a temporary measure as we transition and learn about the APP, learn about broader reporting, not just to that small web interface patient set, and to help us learn how to deduplicate and aggregate our data across practices. Their intention is to provide a list of Medicare patients early in the first quarter of every year during the submission period for the prior year's performance reporting. They warn us also we can't count on that list because it will be incomplete. Typically, Medicare patient lists represent, there's a quarter lag between the claims generation and the list being prepared. So it will include only through the third quarter patient experience. So it's only intended to be a help to identify your patients and deduplicate, but it's not a complete list. And they emphasize that they're still requiring that 100% of the eligible patients be identified, even though we do have that data completeness limitation that we only need to report on 75% of the numerator eligible patients. The second thing to pay attention to in the proposed rule is a proposal to change the certified EHR requirement for advanced APM participants from 75% to 100%, essentially requiring all participants in the APM to have certified EHR. They're also proposing to make a requirement that all advanced APM participants now be required to make a promoting interoperability submission within the MIPS program, and that each of the participants in the APM have a MIPS PI score. Now, all the methods of reporting are still open. That is individual reporting, practice level reporting, and APM level reporting. So all those requirements are still, all those options are still available to you. You're still subject to those exclusions for small practice and non-patient facing. So those are still there, but except for those exceptions, all are expected to have a MIPS PI score. So in review of all of these, look them over. If you need to make comment, if you have input to Medicare, and let's wait for the final rule. Watch it carefully when it comes out in the first days of November.
Absolutely. And I want to remind our listeners that they can always send us a question for Dr. Mingle. You can leave a question on YouTube or on LinkedIn, or send it to us by an email at hello@minglehealth.com. And thank you, Dr. Mingle, for sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you, Kyle. I want to be helpful, and I want this to be useful to all of you. Don't hesitate to correct or supplement my answers. Share your experience. Ask your additional questions. We can be smarter together.